Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another Weather Wednesday. This is what is this episode 5? I think is
I think so.
yeah, is which one this one is. You'll notice I'm in a little bit different environment. I am at home versus being in Miami like I have been the last few times. So I have a little bit better computer here, so you can see I was actually able to use my background the way that I want to. And I got Mike Gronke again with me. Mike, it's good to have you back again.
Yeah,
I know
good to
you
be here.
love talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, for everybody watching, it is Halloween right now. It is October 31st, so we're filming this Tuesday night before the next Weather Wednesday. So I am actually wearing my outfit right now. So I'm actually gonna let's see. Mike, you have any idea what this might be?
Oh man.
It's from a movie. It's from a movie where a
Oh,
guy.
you're gonna embarrass me on the internet.
Oh,
I
come
won't
on,
even.
man.
I'm not even gonna try.
Okay, if I said it was an Adam Sandler movie, does that help at all?
Oh, that actually. Hold on. It's. I think I know what movie.
It's a hockey jersey.
Just tell me.
It's Happy Gilmore.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. Yep. I knew that one.
Yeah, I bought this jersey from Timu actually, and it just
Of
came in.
course.
Yeah, of course, because you can buy anything you want on there. So
Yep.
I it came in this morning, and I said, "Well, I guess that's going to be my Halloween costume this year." So I was Happy
Very nice.
Gilmore.
I'm dressed up like a dad who was freezing cold, trick or treating in 36-degree weather, wearing his Nike whatever warm quarter zip. So
Nice.
yeah, yeah,
All right. So let's see. We talked about a couple things that we were going to do this week, and I think this one we're going to start talking about kind of what goes into making a forecast, how you create it, and things like that. For those
yeah.
that don't remember, Mike is a meteorologist that works for a Part 135 carrier in Columbus, Ohio, that has shares to their airplane. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'll let
I don't
everybody else
know. I don't
figure.
know what that is,
I
but
don't know
yeah,
who
sure.
I don't know who could figure that out, but
Yeah,
Mike does that as a part-time gig, which is kind of cool. And he graduated from Ohio State with a meteorology degree, so he does kind of know what he's talking about, which is kind of nice. It's way better than me trying to say this stuff because I don't know what I'm talking about at all. But Mike, basically, man, if you could just, I know so much more goes into it than
hmm
what people know or can see. Um, you don't have to run us through the entire thing because I'm sure that
yeah,
video would be entirely too long.
yeah.
But if you could just give a quick rundown about like what you do and kind of how you create a forecast and things like that for somebody that's going out to fly.
Sure. So I'll go through kind of the my screen over here. Some of the major, I guess, pillars, if you will, or parts of making a forecast. Go through starting out with observations. We'll talk about this with model data too, but there's a concept, garbage in equals garbage out, right? So if you don't know what the weather's currently like, how the heck do you expect to predict it? So observations, looking at what's currently going on, looking at different models. And then we'll kind of go, I'll talk a little bit about like maybe some trends you're seeing in the various model runs or maybe using experience. And we don't just look at the models and just go, okay, well, the model says this or the forecast says this. Um, so yeah, so first things first, observations. So let me go to here. Observations could be anything from this is a satellite picture, looking at where large areas of precipitation are right now, or even just the setup of the jet stream. Because from this view here, I can actually tell you like there's a nice stream of clouds going up the eastern seaboard. I actually see a little tiny bit of spin coming right here into Ohio, where we're seeing cold air and some actually snow showers this evening, sneaking in snow in October. Um, and then you can see the motion of these clouds kind of coming down across the country and then back up. So you can actually tell just from the satellite kind of the setup of the jet stream, and we can go verify that by going to this is from the Storm Prediction Center. You can get current weather charts from a whole bunch of websites. I like this page because they call it the mesoscale analysis page. Mesoscale meaning smaller scale. Um, it's typically used for severe weather, but you can really use it for any weather analysis. This is the upper level jet stream. If you remember the wind charts we talked about on a different week, on the cut and how this kind of works, but effectively the wind is flowing through or along these lines. The filling colors here are speed, so there's a much higher wind speed over the eastern U.S. right now than the western U.S. But where we saw those clouds all streaming up here quickly up the eastern seaboard, and you can kind of see that little curly Q here over the Great Lakes or coming into Ohio. There's your big speed max over the eastern U.S. The actual center of the trough in the jet stream is coming into Ohio right now, which is why you have that little spin. That's where the actual kind of upper level low is, if you will. So, just more going to show that sometimes just looking at satellite, you can really figure out what's going on in the atmosphere without even looking at all the various weather maps and stuff.
Yeah. Now, on the previous video, I think it was the video we just did. I think it was episode 4. We talked about high pressure versus low pressure systems and that kind of stuff. We talked about how you can find that on the screen. So looking at this, if I remember correctly, that spin, that's the low pressure system that's going through there right now, right?
Yep. So there's a low pressure coming into Ohio right now. High probably somewhere out here with all this clear areas. We can go back here. This is the upper level map. We can go to the surface. The high is typically the actual surface high. So this is the way up high jet stream. This is like 300 millibar. Like that's probably like right now. It's probably like 36,000 feet or something. The surface high pressure is usually between the upper level ridge, which is out here on the west coast, and the upper level trough, which is centered over the Great Lakes. We can go down here to there's a surface map. So here's all of our isobars, if we can remember from the last one, constant lines of pressure. These are in millibars. I know a lot of folks are used to inches of mercury. Millibar is just the metric version of that. We got 1,028, 1,030, 1,032. So this little circle here where we have the highest number would be the high. So pretty much over the Great Plains right now. Then we have the isobars kind of close together. I don't know, it might not have been that windy out where you were tonight, Brandon, but I can tell you here we had gusts like 30 miles an hour trick-or-treating tonight. And these isobars packed together here, that's a sign of it being windy. So it's because the pressure is changing quickly over this span of area from this high out to the west and the lower pressure out to the east.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the low wind tonight, I think, was the only thing that made trick-or-treating tolerable.
Oh, yeah, it would have been okay. It was like 38 degrees. It was kind of cold, but I mean, if it had been windy, it would have been too bad. But yeah, for sure. So, anyways, you start out looking at where's your major pressure systems. We can throw on temperature and dew point on here. Depending on what you're exactly trying to look at for the forecast, whether it's winter precipitation or maybe thunderstorms or whatever, there's a whole bunch of other things you can throw in here. But basically, just get an idea of what's currently going on. So, we have that little low moving into the Ohio Valley. We have a high out to the west. And really not a whole lot else going on. If you actually switch over to radar here, there's just these little snow showers coming through Great Lakes right off to the east. Pretty quiet night overall across the U.S. So something else I would also do would maybe when I first start looking at the computer models, obviously there's not a whole lot of weather to look at the moment, but I would kind of do a quick analysis of, all right, the model that ran, a few hours ago, or maybe this afternoon, what did it say was going to be happening now? Is it on track? For what is it because if it's already wildly off, you probably don't want to use that computer model. So kind of we want to start meshing the observation with what the forecast was for now, and then kind of go from there. So observations where you start. Next, the big part of making a forecast is model data. So we'll go to here. There's so a computer model or a weather model is effectively just a computer code or computer program that has a bunch of algorithms and physics principles built into it to literally model the atmosphere of the Earth. Um, it takes all the various observations from across the world, which can be satellite data, weather stations on the ground, like an ASOS at an airport. They even sometimes feed in airplane data into it, like airplane, like weather and wind observations up high. Also the weather balloons that get sent up. Actually, I can show you that off the Storm Prediction Center website as well. If I can get this little bar to go away. Where are the, there you go, soundings. All these little stars, I don't know how well you can see that on there. These are all the locations across the US where weather balloons get sent up. Um, they get sent up typically twice a day. We go on UTC or Z time. So 0 UTC and 12 UTC are the main times they get sent. If there's some kind of major weather event happening, maybe like severe weather outbreak, huge winter storm, you will sometimes see off-hour weather balloons. They're kind of expensive. So, not that the federal government cares too much about spending a lot of money, but there has to be some kind of limit. So 0 and 12 ZR when they typically go up, this is a major part of what goes into weather models because the weather balloon is the only piece of raw actual data that gets sampled through the atmosphere. There's obviously all kinds of weather stations at the ground, all the airports and things around the U.S., but only these sites here have actual raw data from the weather balloon as it goes up. This is called a skew-T chart. We won't get into all the details of this, but basically this is looking at temperature, humidity, wind going up into the atmosphere. But all of this data gets fed into the computer models each time they run.
Hey, Mike,
So
just
yeah,
real quick, when we're talking about those weather balloons, so I'm going to sound stupid asking this question, I'm sure, but are these the ones that are tethered, or are these untethered where they just send them up and then they get the readings as it's going up? Because I've seen a tethered balloon,
yeah.
that was like 60,000 feet or something stupid. Um,
Yeah,
I
these aren't attached to the ground. I mean, these they fly wherever they go and they land wherever they land. They have a little
okay,
thing where it's like, if you find this, please return it back to the National Weather Service or whatever. I mean,
okay,
you know, and I've seen there's actually some pretty funny videos if you look up online, people launching these when there's like, gale force winds because they're all like because it's this huge. I mean, they're big and they're
yeah,
full of helium, so they go up and so I mean they're and it's interesting sometimes how fast they go up. You can actually, if you're at the weather service and they launch, you can go inside and it has like a little like satellite tracking GPS thing, and it's interesting when there's like a really strong low level jet or just jet stream in general, how far or how fast it gets, like just away from where you are. But yeah, so these are untethered.
okay,
Um, Again, these go up at 0 and 12 UTC, and so for that reason, there are the main cycles that we look at in the weather models, or the major weather models, run in coordination with this at 0 UTC and 12 UTC. They also run most of the major models at 6 and 18 UTC as well, just with some additional surface data. So you get basically 4 runs, we call them, or each time of the computer runs of those models. Now there are some other models that run more frequently. We have some that run like some really high resolution ones that go every single hour. Those are very helpful for like severe weather or snow, or just when you're trying to get rapidly changing stuff. And that model getting new, it gets new radar, satellite observation data, not obviously knowing the weather balloon data, but it gets all that stuff fed into it each hour. So um, these models literally are performing trillions of calculations because basically what they do is they predict the temperature, humidity, precipitation, all the weather variables for a given point across the entire world. Um, and how close those points are together is actually called the resolution of the model. So that's like how the higher resolution the model, the more detail you get, the clearer picture you get, and everything. And that's the closer to how close those points are together. Um, so Uh, but for each of those points, it has to do a calculation for that point in space, and then also usually like 20, 30, 40, sometimes even 50 or 60 different layers high above that point. And it's running all these like, I mean, crazy high-end math and physics and stuff, all those calculations, and they all have to run. I mean, these are run on some of the world's biggest supercomputers, and they still take, probably 2, 3, 4 hours to run, um, just because of how many calculations have to occur for these models to go.
And
We're going to look at
these are the things. These are the things like when you see, I don't know, when they're tracking a hurricane or something like that. Is that kind of the same kind of stuff that they show when they say these are the possible paths from the models where they've gotten like 17 different paths that it could take?
Yeah, so those are just 17 different different computer models effectively. So there's there's a couple core computer models we use for just general weather forecasting, but then when it comes to like hurricane, there's specific hurricane models that run. They effectively have like just little differences among them of like maybe different assumptions in the atmosphere, or just because like we think we know pretty well how the atmosphere works, but we obviously don't know perfect. Otherwise, we'd get the weather forecast perfect all the time.
Right.
So just little variations in the code and equations and stuff that run. That's where you get all different tracks and everything as they run out. So and whenever you have when you have a computer model, the error effectively cascades with time, because if you think about it, if it thinks what's going to go from like here to here, but in real life it actually goes here, like this is like the track of the hurricane, right?
Yeah.
Then this being off is going to impact the position over here, because now it's already wrong from its initial assumption of day one. We'll call it day one. So that means day two is going to be wrong because its day one was wrong. So it's day three is going to be even more wrong because it's day two. You can kind of see how that cascades. And so that's why the weather forecast in general gets less accurate as you go out in time, because each day's forecast is building on assumptions of how all these various weather systems were going to interact the day before.
Yeah, it's kind of like aircraft navigation. If I start at point A and I'm half a degree off, by the time I'm so many miles down, that half a degree is now like 30 degrees or whatever.
Exactly.
Like
it's just difference. Like that. Yeah, for sure. So I would say, the forecasts are generally, at least on the bigger scale. I mean, I understand like snow forecasts can be pretty off. They're like a day out, but
yeah.
Overall the models are pretty good within 48, 72 hours. They on average are not too bad, 4, 5, 6 days out. So when you start getting out to like 7, 8 days and further out, is when the model skill starts to really drop off pretty substantially. And it definitely varies. And actually, there's websites you can go to that track like I think it's like a correlation of like what was its whatever surface or 500 millibar or whatever map compared to what really happened that day, and it'll be like a 0.89 correlation or 0.9. Basically, was it 89% correct or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's all over the place. I mean, it's not like the models are always getting an A every single day. It's like sometimes they handle a weather system really well 5 days out. Sometimes it is a complete joke. So it varies a lot. And it usually depends on what's the weather setup, how many different systems are interacting with each other, and how complex everything is going on. So here's kind of a basic surface forecast map. So we have our isobars with the pressure. This actually would be, we'll slide it right around to where we are right now. This should look pretty close to what the map was. We'll go back to here. I lost it. So let me go back to the map there we go. So again, we have our high. And I think I mentioned the pressure gradient over Ohio where it's windy and the lower pressure out to the east. Here is what the weather model said it was going to look like. Now, this is only a few hours out in time, but here's our high. Nice little pressure gradient here, lower pressure out to the east, and some of the precip with the showers coming in down. So it's doing a pretty good job so far.
Yeah.
But this goes out in time, and this is where we can kind of see again the general. This is more like your common weather, right? This is showing where there's the fill in here. You can see at the bottom it has precipitation amount. That's called QPF or quantitative precipitation forecast. Just the number like point 0.5 inches of liquid precipitation or whatever. Um, so we're going to be looking at that. You got your temperature forecast here, where you can see where it's currently cold here in Ohio. Thankfully, this model thinks it's going to get warm this weekend, so we hope that's correct. Um, we got temperature. What were we going to say?
I was just looking at that and you said, it's supposed to be warm. And this weekend I'm going down to Miami. So it's like red. I'm happy to see that.
Notice how down there it's basically red the entire time. Like
Yeah,
nothing ever really changes down there.
I'm good with that.
Yeah. Um, but we're also looking higher up into the atmosphere too. This is like the 500 millibar map. We're looking here at like where there's different weather systems up high with like just what we can hear some like what the meteorologist on TV says like a disturbance in the atmosphere where there's like a little wave of energy coming through tends to be at this 500 millibar level, and then up here at 250 millibars, this is the upper level jet stream. You can see the next few days here we have a pretty what we call zonal weather pattern where it's going west to east. Typically, that would be a mild air for the country, which is you mentioned the warmer up coming this weekend. That makes sense because when you have west east across the U.S., where's that air coming from? It's coming from the Pacific Ocean, which is not that cold. Um, right now, the current weather pattern is much more what we call amplified, where there's a lot more waviness to the jet, and you actually have this wind coming literally directly out of Canada, probably the Arctic originally, through Canada, dumping it straight into the U.S. and then screaming out to the east there with that pretty major, really major jet. Actually, that's a 175 knot jet there off
Wow.
the East Coast. So uh, what you're looking at and what maps you're looking at is kind of also depends on what you're trying to forecast. If I'm trying to build a forecast, maybe for maybe like the ceilings at the airport, I'm not really looking at the 250 millibar level. I'm looking more down at this is a relative humidity chart for 925 millibar, which is like 3,000 to 4,000 feet above the ground. So I'm trying to see where is there copious amounts of moisture low to the ground that would cause possibly a ceiling, overcast conditions at an airport, that kind of thing. Or can't remember if this one has wind or not. This one doesn't have surface wind, but if you're looking for like a wind forecast at an airport, obviously you're gonna be watching the wind on the models and not just at the surface. When we look for like let's say there's like a very windy day, we're gonna be looking at the winds above the ground too. Like tonight, you see this nice little speed max coming through into Ohio. There's a secondary cold front coming through. And if you remember from our last video or a couple videos ago with cold fronts tend to have sinking air behind them. And so that as that air sinks, it's pulling down some of the wind energy up in the atmosphere. So I'm not just looking at what the model at the surface is saying. I'm trying to kind of to maybe better get a sense of is the computer model correct in thinking it's going to be windy tonight. I'm looking at well, what's it thinking is happening a few thousand feet up in the air, and we have a nice little 30, 40 knot jet at like 5,000 feet coming through, which makes sense that it's windy tonight because there's a cold front, air is sinking, it's pulling down some of those winds from a few thousand feet up, causing some gusty winds tonight. So if I was making a TAF for the airport tonight, I'd probably be forecasting some decent wind gusts. Um, so yeah, when you're looking at these, there's different models to look at. This one's called the GFS, Global Forecast System. This one is run by NOAA, the National Weather Service. This is the U.S. model. A lot of times in the winter, last few years, the TV people have gotten more into showing the different models, especially for like winter storms. So you typically will see like the American model, and then there's like the European model. So that's the ECMWF. This is run by uh, a European forecast agency. So we're going to look at various computer models. We're going to kind of there's a little bit of blending together, but there's also kind of looking at like what's what makes sense the most. You got to use some of your meteorology knowledge. Obviously, if you're a meteorologist, you kind of know how the atmosphere is supposed to behave, and when you see one thing on a model at maybe 500 millibars, does it make sense what it's doing down at the ground? So we don't just blindly look at the model and go, oh, well, it says it's going to be 85 this weekend. It's going to be 85 this weekend. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
there's also trends. So sometimes the models are all kind of locked into one thing, and then on one run it jumps and it does something crazy, and you're like, well, hold on, this is not anywhere close to what it's been saying the last couple of days. I want to see are any of the other models trying to do this? Like, let's say there's a winter storm, and here in Ohio we're on the rain snow line all the time, right? And so maybe the rain snow line is supposed to be in hitting about Lexington. It's going to snow here in Cincinnati. But when if that model shifts 50 miles on one run, I'm not necessarily going to completely pull my snow forecast because of that one model going. I'm going to say, okay, what are any of the other models trying to shift north? Maybe I'll wait for that next time the model runs. Does it do it again? Does it kind of go back? Or is it kind of slowly shifting north with time every time it runs? So there's like trends. That's why when I talk about trends in the data, I was like, what's been happening the last several runs of the models. Like this here is the 18Z run, but we can go back in time and we can look at what the 12Z run this morning showed. That's 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern Daylight Time, or even the 0Z from last night. What did it show? So, so you got to kind of piece it together, with all that. And then what was the other thing I was going to do? Oh yes, something else here for temperature and sky conditions. This is kind of aviation chart related. And there's a lot of numbers on here, so I'll break it down best I can. This is MOS guidance called Model Output Statistics. What this does is it takes the forecast from that GFS model we just ran, or we just looked at, and then it runs it through statistically what's happened in the past at that location given those weather conditions. Because sometimes models can have a bias, or the model is it's just showing something unrealistic. A lot you'll see this in the summer or winter with extreme temperatures. Model thinks it's going to get to -10. We did get to -10 last year, but that was a rare occurrence for us in Ohio.
Yeah.
A lot of times when the model's saying -10 several days out, it's going to end up kind of correcting as you get closer, and it's going to be like maybe 5 above 0 or something like that. Well, this model output statistics is probably going to be closer to that, more statistically likely number. So it's kind of taking what the model is saying and also running it against what's statistically most likely. Now, obviously, if you have an event where there really is going to be something extreme, this is not necessarily going to catch it right away because it's kind of waiting, right, that historical perspective into it. But when you're looking at this here, we have you can kind of see off the top or the left here, TMP for temperature. So this is temperature going out in time. These are all Z time increments. So 0Z, 3Z, 6Z, your dew point. If you remember that when you're decoding a TAF, you have your sky conditions. So we have scattered, clear, few. We have the wind direction. So 2932. So that's 290, 320. And the wind speed down here. And at the bottom, aviation related is the ceiling and visibility. So these number codes, 8 is I think is the high as it goes. But if you see 1s and 2s on here, that's like a couple hundred feet. So that's not good. So this is another type of model though that we would look at. And then this one here goes out in time. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, going further out in the week. It has the high and low temperature, and there's some of these other numbers in the middle are like odds of precipitation and whatnot. But just thought I gave you an example of some like more text data we kind of look at for building a forecast. Other thing mentioned, individual models versus an ensemble. So Brandon, you kind of actually tipped on this a little bit earlier with when you have like the spaghetti plot, right?
Yeah.
So the GFS, the American model, is one particular what we call deterministic or one main run of that model. But then all the models also have what's called an ensemble run. And an ensemble is basically like we were saying earlier. You take that model and you maybe tweak the initial conditions a little bit, or um, you tweak the how some of the physics or the equations work in there, and you run it a whole bunch of times. So this here is the GFS ensemble going out. Let me see if I can get it out in time here. So it says that when is this? This weekend, a low is going to develop here in the Texas Panhandle. You can, and then this has all these little L's are the different positions of where the different ensemble members think the low might be. And so you can see when it first starts, it gets clustered. As you go out in time, there's obviously a lot of spread there.
Oh
The the
wow.
the color picture behind is the ensemble average or the average position of it, but all these different L's are the different locations where it's seeing where a low might go. You can actually, if you really want to get trippy, you can go here and this is these are all the different members, all in all shown here. So the ensembles are helpful for going further out in time. So when you see those forecasts from like AccuWeather or the Weather Channel or whatever of 14 days out or even further out than that, they are for sure using they're using the ensemble runs because it's taking all those different possible solutions and kind of meshing them together into kind of the average of what all the different runs are saying.
Yeah. Now, see, with that, I mean, I'm guessing this is just me guessing, but that most of the people that would watch this video that have ever flown, that have ever wanted to fly, that have ever even watched the weather forecast, you can pretty much go, how close are they really going to be? Because
Right.
again, it's one of those things where we've said this numerous times before that it's not an exact science.
No.
There is some kind of interpolation and guesswork and that kind of stuff that kind of goes into it.
Yeah.
And by guesswork, I don't mean just throwing spaghetti at a wall. It's educated guesswork, but it's
Yeah.
still guesswork.
Yeah.
But I can see now that if they used it like the average of an ensemble,
Yeah.
how sometimes they could just be just way off.
Oh
Because
yeah, totally.
if the average has it here and it does this weird one up here, okay, well now you're this far off.
Right. What if that one member that was like 30, 50, or even 100 miles further north actually is the correct
Is the correct
outcome?
one, right?
And when you get into winter weather and winter forecast or winter storms and stuff, that matters a lot more. I mean, there's you still in the summer or any time of year, if it's off, right? But when you're talking about, the low pressure area is now going to track 100 miles north of where you thought it was. That means the rain snow line is 100 miles north of where you thought it was going to be.
Right.
And if you were 50 miles north of the rain snow line, so you're in the snow, and that shifts 100 miles north, you're now getting rain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's no longer a 4 to 6 inch snow forecast. It's 35 degrees and raining.
Right.
Um,
Now, see,
so
I think the opposite of that would probably be worse, though. If you're 50 miles south of the rain
I
snow
guess
line and that
that's
damn
true. Yeah,
thing comes down 100 miles,
that's true.
now you're
That's where you
getting
get the surprise snow event.
right. Yeah, now you're
Yeah,
getting 4 to 6 inches of snow when you thought
right.
you were going to get 2 inches of rain.
Now, for all other scenarios, so like fall, winter, or even in the winter when there's not we're not talking about snow, it's just rain. It's not as big of a deal. I mean, if it's a huge shift, it probably is going to matter where you thought it was going to rain all day and now you're just getting maybe scattered showers or whatever, or the high was supposed to be 45, now it's 55. But if the big slug of rain kind of goes a little north of you, but it still rains at your house, and the forecast was for it to rain, do you really care?
Yeah.
You got 1 inch of rain instead of 0.5 inches of rain. I mean,
Right.
who really cares? But when it comes to snow, that matters a lot more.
Yeah.
Partially because of we'll talk about in our next video with snow. Partially because of the how water expands, and so when you have small amounts of air, it also expands. But also because just some people just care more. People it affects you and I if there is 5 inches of snow versus 1 inch of snow.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
doesn't really affect you and I if there's a half inch of rain versus an inch of rain. Now, if
Yeah.
it's something crazy like we get 5 inches of rain instead of an inch and we're all flooded, that's different. But um, in general, the amount that the models are frequently off with rainfall, just in the end, for the common person, doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I
So
mean, most people aren't outside with a beaker or whatever trying to measure how much rain has come down. But you
yeah,
can guarantee that when it starts snowing, somebody's out there with a ruler
yep,
saying they said 6 inches, I got 14.
yep.
This is crap.
Well, and the other thing is the amount of rain that falls is highly variable over a 50-mile area or whatever. Anyways, I mean, if the weather system comes through, it's not like the north side of town and the south side of town get exactly a half inch of rain. You're gonna get like 0.35 here, zero point 0.5 here, zero point 0.4 here. It's gonna vary because there's little pockets of random slightly heavier rain that develop, or maybe a little embedded thunderstorm happens to hit one neighborhood, they get a little more rain. So that's normal. And then the models aren't usually good, or really aren't good enough at that scale to predict that there's a little heavier band of rain over this one neighborhood. But when it snows, now the one neighborhood got 6 inches of snow instead of 3 inches of snow, and so it matters more.
Yeah.
So um, that is, I mean, so we take all this model data, we put it all together, and it when it really comes down to it is truly an educated guess. If I'm looking at one model that says one thing and one that says the other thing, um, I try to find supporting data. So there's the major models, but there's other ones to look at too. You can look at the ensembles, like if you have it, if it's GFS versus Euro. Okay, well, which do the Euro ensemble averages kind of favor one or the other? Are they backing up what the main Euro model says, or are they not backing it up? There's other short range. When you get into the 72-hour or less view, there's a lot more models that run just because they can do more high resolution stuff, and the really high resolution models are obviously performing even more calculation, because remember, it's a all those calculations are every little point, right? So if the model is really high resolution, there's a lot more points for it to forecast. So there's a lot more computing power. So there's no way, at least in 2023, for us to run the hourly super high resolution model out 7 days. It's just the like it. I think they're getting better now. Like the way it used to be. I think the her it's called the her. It's this one right here. It used to be that I think if you ran this model more than a day or two out, the actual weather would occur before the computer finally got to the forecast. So there's
Jeez.
just no point. So they're getting better. It can now run. It runs. This one goes 18 hours every hour, and on the zero, I think it's the 0, 6, 8, 12, and 18 runs. So 4 times a day, it goes out 48 hours. So we're getting so they're what I'm trying to get at is there's more model data available when you get into that shorter time range, and that's where you can start looking at, or is there more supporting data for one particular case versus the other, for the forecast.
Yeah.
So there's obviously not a whole lot to see here, but you can kind of see. I mean, this is at the 3 kilometer resolution, which is about as high as it gets right now for operational models. This actually kind of predicts individual like cells. So you can see there's some lake effect stuff going on in the next couple of days up here, over New York. So I guess that's really that's kind of the gist of it. You also can use your, like I said, meteorological experience for this is what the model is saying really makes sense from the actual meteorology standpoint. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's off its rocker. you know. You'll see on Twitter or Facebook or whatever in the wintertime, in the weather community, even sometimes unfortunately actual TV people, they post it, we call them the clown maps. It's the I don't know how much snow there's going to be. There you go. Okay, there's some lake effect snow. Here's your total snowfall accumulation forecast. Sometimes when you go out 7, 8, 9 days, I always like to say the the Ohio or anywhere that lives in the 10-day model world gets a heck of a lot of snow. I mean, there are some crazy blizzards that apparently occur in fake la model land at 10 days out. And they just never come to fruition. But um, you'll see people post, unfortunately, these like 10-day snow maps where it has like 20 inches of snow or whatever for 10 days out. And if you're really a meteorologist and probably the unfortunate people posting this, they really know that is highly unlikely to occur. Our job is to see that and go, yeah, nope, I'm not gonna make that my forecast. Um, but you got the hype builders out there who just want to say, hey, this could happen in 7 days, could be a blizzard, and it's not a 0% chance, but it's not a high percent chance at that
Wait,
point.
wait. So
So
you're saying there are people out there who say certain things and put certain things on the internet simply to get clicks?
I mean, which by the way, like and subscribe to this video.
Yeah, here, right here. It's gonna be a little card for the playlist.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I mean, I've seen it. Hell, I've sent you things, been like, hey, can you explain this to me? Because it's the guy's got a doomsday forecast coming out
yeah,
saying that it's gonna be 7,000 feet of snow, and it's like,
yeah,
no.
yeah,
And I think I've gotten to the point now where when I look at a 10-day forecast, I kind of ignore the anything from about 7 to 10 days out,
yeah.
because it always ends up shifting a little bit, even if we're talking about temperature or cloudiness,
Yeah.
like that
Well,
kind of
and
stuff
that
kind of
is
shifts.
one of the jobs of the meteorologist is to kind of take that model output and go, okay, that is just highly unlikely. That I mean, the number of times I have seen us get forecasted 6, 10, 12 inches of snow versus the number of times we have actually received
Yeah,
6, 10, 12 inches of snow. And I'm talking like the 4 or 5 day range. When you get closer, the models tend to finally come into reality and be like, oh, whoops, sorry. But at that 5 or 6 day range, there's been a lot of times where I can't even count how many times I've seen just and it's not even just snow, even sometimes extreme temperature or severe weather. That's another one. The models, because it's just everything in the atmosphere is a delicate balance, and if that temperature is just off a little bit, or the timing of that front is off a little bit, or there was supposed to be a little bit of sun to charge the atmosphere and ends up being a little bit cloudier than it was supposed to be. Um, I mean, a lot of times we're talking like honestly small amounts of actual error in the model. I mean, they're really not that far off on the individual elements that are occurring in the atmosphere, but the outcome of said elements is wildly different based on the happening. Snow is the easiest one to go because it's like, oh, it was 34 degrees instead of 31 degrees. On any other day, if the model was within 3 degrees of being accurate, we would say, good job, fantastic.
right.
That's a good forecast. But when it rains instead of snows, you're like, what the heck? This is completely wrong. Or if it's just a little bit cloudier one day than it was supposed to be, you don't really care. I mean, whatever. The model still did an overall decent job. But if it's a severe weather day and there's supposed to be a huge line of storms and it ends up being a little cloudier, they don't get as much sun and heating and everything, and all of a sudden that severe line of storms that the TV people have been hyping up for the last couple of days just completely fails to materialize. Everyone's like, "What the heck?"
Yeah.
So, so that's kind of a little bit of the, I guess background on the why behind why you get sometimes what appears to be major forecast failures. They're really actually very small errors in the models, but it's just those small errors matter for the actual eventual outcome of the weather. So.
So I got a couple questions I want to ask that I probably have asked you in the past, but I can't remember if I have or not. So when we're talking about a forecast and we're talking about when you see percentages,
Yeah.
when someone says it's going to be 50% chance of rain, 40% chance of rain, you see videos where they talk about, well, that doesn't necessarily mean, what everybody seems to think it means. Can you can you kind of explain when someone says there's a 50% chance it's going to rain today, what they're actually talking about, like what that percentage is based on?
This is a little controversial. Um, but it's well, technically, I mean, it's a probabilistic thing. I mean, and that is something that I will say the general public is not always great at understanding is probabilities, but
Yeah.
that is really the best way to predict the weather is from a probabilistic standpoint, technically. But I think most people would probably say that if there's a 30% chance of rain, that 30% of the time that you're saying 30% chance of rain, it's going to rain at your given location. And it's more because of the models are like I just told you that the highest resolution one's 3 kilometers. Most of them are more like 8, 9, 10 kilometers, or even 12 kilometers between the grid points that they're forecasting. So Mike's house versus Brandon's house, if we're in the same neighborhood or even same city, the models just simply aren't good enough to predict down to that scale. Um, so you kind of have to do that probabilistic thing because I mean, if you're talking about pop-up showers, there is literally no way to know where that individual shower is going to pop up. I may know that there's a condition today in the atmosphere that is probably going to cause pop-up showers, and I may be able to tell you, the conditions are a little bit more favorable tomorrow than they are today. So maybe I have a 40% chance tomorrow with a 20% chance today. Um, but whether or not that shower is going to pop up over your house, if anyone tries to tell you that they know, they're lying. So when
So
they say tracking it neighborhood by neighborhood, okay, on the actual live radar we can do that, but not from a forecast standpoint.
right.
So
So I guess the question is when they say 40% chance, does that
mhm.
mean a 40% chance for their entire viewing area?
It should be
That at some point somewhere in the viewing area, 40% of the time is going to get rain?
on the way the TV forecasts have to be because they are giving it to the whole audience. Yes, technically, that would be where I guess you can get a little more precision from like the Weather Channel or even weather.gov, National Weather Service, where they create forecasts for the entire area, but on a more point basis. Like for the weather, I'm sure the Weather Channel is the same way, but for the Weather Service, when they actually they're creating their forecast that you would click on and get, they actually create a little map and they create zones where, like, let's say they think the northern part of the area is more likely, they'll paint a higher probability there and then scale it back as it goes south. So that way, when you click on your town, it then derives the probability based on where in that map, that they drew,
Okay.
that it is. So when you're on the internet and you're looking at individual forecasts, that it's probably closer to being more for your exact area. When you're looking at it on TV, yeah, it's just because of the way they're delivering the forecast. I mean, they're only delivering one forecast, and it technically is for their entire viewing area, which is typically a pretty decent size amount of area.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I will say so what was this? This was Saturday, this past Saturday, so like 4 days ago. Um my daughter was supposed to have a Girl Scout parade thing for Halloween and whatever. And it was just drizzle, it was raining, it was just nasty. It was like 45 degrees, just pouring down rain.
yeah,
And my wife and I were just like, nah, we don't want to go. And we asked, said, hey, if it's raining, are you going to postpone it? Are you going to do whatever? And he's like, no, radar says 10% chance, 10% chance. And I
yeah,
said, okay. So immediately what I did, I went to what we've had before, and I'll put a little thing here as a little disclaimer to one of our other videos where we talked about METARs and TAFs. And I pulled up the freaking TAF for the airport that's here, and it was hour by hour. It had from this time rain, from this time drizzle, from this
yeah,
time rain, and I'm like, I told my wife, I was like, it's not going to stop raining. It's just not.
yeah. Well, that TAF was an actual forecast from a human being. Unfortunately, there's a lot of weather apps out there that when I talk about you have model data and then you have the human interpretation element to create the actual forecast. Unfortunately, a lot of other apps out there kind of are lacking in the human interpretation element, and they're just spitting out what one particular model says.
Right.
And as we talked about, when you have those models, we got the little low here versus low here, and if that app is taking the one model that has the low up here, but it's totally wrong, it's gonna be a pretty bad forecast.
Yeah.
So,
So
um,
okay. So on that note, then is there any app that you would suggest for somebody to for, and it's obviously it's, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
Yeah.
is there an app that you use that is available to people like me that, you know, aren't in the weather area, that can, it's easily understandable and things like that, where I can get the information I want?
So while I would, as much as I give the Weather Channel crap, their app really isn't horrible, and you be cautious on the, you know, blockbuster type weather events and stuff, or their I'll say their snowfall forecast. The snowfall forecast more than 4 days out are just kind of, I don't want to say they're bogus, but they're lower chance of coming true. I've
Simple
seen
enough.
before where the Weather Channel has like on day 8, you know, scattered snow showers 1 to 3 inches. It's like what? What? Where are you getting that? Like 1 to 3 inches? Like nobody should be talking about snow accumulation, actual amounts 8 days in advance.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, it's fine to throw out there. There's going to be snow showers with a little bit of light accumulation, maybe, but you throw out the numbers, people get that in their head. Oh, there's going to be 3 inches of snow next Monday.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly.
But that aside, the Weather Channel app is definitely easy to digest. It's not too bad. I also like the National Weather Service. I don't know how, I think they may have an app, but their website's pretty easy to navigate on your phone. Weather.gov. So that one's pretty good. Those are my probably my go-tos if I was really I'm a nerd and I'm a meteorologist, so I'm usually looking at the actual models. I don't know what's
Right.
gonna happen.
Right.
And I'm not gonna lie, none of the apps are particularly amazing when if you're trying to figure out like there's like bands of rain coming through and it's like is it gonna be raining at 4 o'clock? I mean, they're you know, it's kind of so just because
Yeah.
um they're typically taking like one model, and that one model, you know, may or may not be right 3 hours in advance or 6 hours in advance or whatever. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, but yeah, those are both the weather service, weather.gov, and the Weather Channel are both are both fine. And really, I mean, local TV stations, it varies obviously by your city, but they're obviously going to have a little more local knowledge or you know experience with your area versus some of the other random apps out there.
Yeah. All right. So last question is going to be, how long does it take you to do a forecast? Like, I know we kind of just briefly went through a lot of the different things that you have to do,
Yeah.
but like, and I'm sure it may depend on what you're actually doing the forecast for, I guess.
Yeah.
But on average, how long do you think it takes you? Like, you come into work, you're going to do a forecast. How long does that usually take?
Is a hard one to answer because it really is like, I mean, if I just need to look at, you know, one of the things we do is we go through all the weather forecast for the cities that we're flying to tomorrow, right?
Okay.
And so we come in, there may be like 300 cities we're flying to tomorrow, and probably throughout most of the morning between like, you know, 8 and noon or so, putting in all those forecasts. Now, you know, on a day like tomorrow where it's dry and VFR for most of the country, we're going to pretty quickly be able to determine where there's no weather happening and just blanket dry VFR a bunch of things. So it really depends on how like what weather is happening. It might take me a few minutes to figure out that it's clear. It might take me, you know, the better part of an hour to really hammer out a major winter storm going through New York City or something, and where I really think the rain snow line is going to set up, or the sleet and all that good stuff. Um, but if I was maybe, you know, thinking back to when I interned at some TV stations, I mean, you know, you'd come in for the evening news at like 2 o'clock, probably spend like an hour and a half forecasting, getting which is of course just one city. Um, and that again that number varies a little bit. If it's sunny and 70 the next 5 days, you're not spending an hour on that forecast.
Sure.
But if there's severe weather or if there's a major, or even just a lot of weather, even just rain, but if there's a lot of stuff going on, you're going to be spending, you know, more of that hour, an hour and a half on the next 7 days. So probably that. It's not for one location. You're not going to spend all day, if that makes sense.
Right.
I mean, you can certainly watch the weather all day. And you know, if you work for a weather service office, National Weather Service, you know, they're obviously looking at just one area all day. But they're more concerned with like, if there's severe weather or something going on, or just the evolving weather throughout the day, updating the forecast and keeping up with any changes and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, the big thing is when somebody goes, especially like to go flying or something like that. Like, when I was in the military and I did the flying there, we went to our weather shop and the weather guy would go through the whole forecast and um you know, you kind of get used to just somebody briefing you on it and just somebody saying, okay, well, this is what your weather's going to be, blah 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 blah,
Yeah.
and you just assume they look it up on weather.com right before you walk in. So it's kind of good. It's kind of good to see the other side, to see what actually
Yeah.
goes into it.
Yeah.
And the effort that it takes to be able to put out this kind of stuff. And it's also good to see why sometimes you guys can just be completely freaking wrong.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
I
And the good meteorologists out there, and I'll say the good one. I'm sure most meteorologists obviously want to be right. I mean, and it's just like any other job. There's people who put more effort in than others, but
sure.
I mean, I real I someone a lot of meteorologists tend to be very passionate about the weather. I mean, I've loved weather since I was like 6 years old or whatever. And so, like, I mean, I truly want to be correct. I'm not just like, I don't know, whatever. It's gonna be 6 inches of snow. I don't really care. It's not like that. So I mean, so they're really they are putting in the effort, and they are frustrated. They're just as frustrated, if not more, than you are, when the forecast comes out wrong. And then we try to look at, okay, well, what happened that led to this being incorrect? I mean, and there are some times where it was just, all the data you were looking at. I mean, we're none of us are psychic. I mean, if every single
Yeah.
computer model is wrong, the forecast is going to be wrong. When there's only so much we can do, there with the human interpretation of it and everything. If all the models are just completely off, that's just how it goes.
Yeah. And honestly, I say that in jest. I mean, I know that you guys, do everything you can and whatever. I think it is funny though that the joke always gets made that you can be wrong 60% of the time, and still keep your job. Like that
Yeah.
kind of stuff is hilarious to me. But I mean I understand it.
There's some,
Especially
but
talking to you
I've been to
guys.
some conferences where they bring up, they're kind of funny, but like it's like true but funny stats where it's like the percentage accuracy of like the day 1, 2, and like 3 forecasts are like for like temperature and precipitation are like far more higher. It's like 80-90% accuracy rate or whatever, which is much higher rate of success than an NBA free throw shooter, or they're much higher rate of success than the amount of time a doctor tells you you're going to live if you have cancer, or stuff like
Right.
that, where it's like all these other professions where no one goes like, gosh, those NBA players, man, they can hit the nets 50% on time and still get paid, which is technically true. But
Right.
but the jokes don't get made as much about them. It's just
Right.
I think it's kind of because weather impacts everyone's lives every single day.
Yeah.
You care what the weather's going to be like, and if it snows and your commute to work sucks, or you wreck your car, or you're just pissed because your daughter had an event and it's raining, but it
Yep.
said it was a 10% chance, and you thought the weather wasn't going to be a problem. Now it is. I mean, it impacts everyone's life, and so they get all you get mad that it was wrong. I guess that's really what it
Hey,
is.
I mean, if
But
you can live with this, if it's something where you can be right 30% of the time, that's all you got to be 30% of the time, because in Major League Baseball, if they hit 3 out of 10, they go to the freaking Hall of Fame. So just
there you
30%
go.
of the time, that's all you need.
That's true. That is true. Exactly.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you running through that and kind of showing us what it looks like when you go out to do a forecast and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And to everybody watching, again, like, subscribe, everything. If you like this kind of stuff, you want to hear this kind of stuff, go ahead and put a comment or something like that. Share the video, so we can see it and know that you're interacting with it. But give the meteorologists a break, okay? It's not always
Yes.
their fault. Sometimes the
Yeah.
computers just get it wrong.
Yep.
So on that note, we're going to send it off, and we're going to talk about ice, and I think it's ice and temperature inversions, We'll figure it out next week.
No, we'll probably talk about snow forecast again. It's almost winter, so it's just something,
Yeah, it's just something that's going to be out there.
Yeah.
But anyway, join us again next week. We'll talk about ice and rain, and we'll see how that goes. Until then, have a great week. Hope your Halloweens were all safe, and hopefully nobody got too scared. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
See ya.